In the summer of 1847, beneath the suffocating heat of Georgia, the Whitmore plantation stood like a white monument to power. From a distance, its columns looked regal, almost divine. Up close, they were stained by sweat, fear, and something far darker. At its center ruled Evelyn Whitmore. She was not young, but she carried herself with a posture that demanded obedience. After her husband's sudden death from fever 3 years earlier, the estate had not weakened. It had expanded. Fields stretched farther. The slave quarters multiplied. Profits doubled. People whispered that grief had hardened her. They were wrong. Evelyn Whitmore had never been soft. Her 2 sons, Thomas and Henry, were raised inside a house where discipline was colder than love. Thomas, the elder, was 23 in 1847. Henry had just turned 19. They had inherited their father's height, but not his authority. In truth, they feared their mother more than any overseer feared a whip. The Whitmore plantation operated differently from neighboring estates. While other planters purchased enslaved people at auctions in Savannah, Evelyn had reduced her dependence on outside traders. Fewer wagons arrived each year. Fewer transactions were recorded, yet the slave population grew. At first, nearby landowners admired her efficiency. Self-sustaining. One neighbor remarked during a dinner party, "A remarkable business, mine, for a widow." But the overseers knew something was unusual. Birth records on plantation were meticulously kept. Names, dates, weights of newborn infants. Evelyn insisted on it. She inspected the ledgers herself each Sunday afternoon in her private study, her gloved fingers turning pages with unnerving precision. Strong stock must be cultivated carefully, she once told her sons over supper. Thomas thought she was speaking about horses. He learned otherwise the following winter. One evening, Evelyn summoned him to her study. The fireplace burned low. The heavy curtains were drawn tight. "Sit," she commanded. Thomas obeyed. On the desk lay 3 birth certificates. He recognized the names of the mothers, young enslaved women from the lower quarters. "Do you see the pattern?" she asked calmly. Thomas did not answer. "You are the pattern." The silence that followed seemed to hollow out the room. Evelyn explained her philosophy without shame. Purchasing slaves was expensive. Healthy young men sold at premium prices. Women of childbearing age even more. But a plantation that produced its own labor force? That was true wealth. "We will not rely on markets," she said. "We will create our own." Thomas felt the blood drain from his face. "You will do your duty," she continued. "As heir to this estate, you will strengthen it." When he protested, quietly, shakily, Evelyn's expression did not change. "Everything you enjoy," she said, gesturing toward the house, the land, the polished silver, "exists because your father understood expansion. I understand it better." Thomas obeyed. Henry was brought into the arrangement a year later. Unlike his brother, Henry resisted openly. He shouted. He accused her of madness. He threatened to leave. Evelyn let him speak. Then she revealed something that silenced him forever. The plantation, legally, belonged entirely to her. Their father had structured it so. If Henry defied her, he would receive nothing, not $1, not an acre, not even his horse. "You are not free, Henry," she said softly. "You are merely privileged." After that, he complied. The enslaved women selected were chosen carefully. Youthful, physically strong, often isolated from family ties. Some were promised lighter duties. Some were threatened. Most had no choice at all. Children were born year after year. The ledger grew thicker. Evelyn recorded every lineage with chilling accuracy. She calculated productivity projections based on projected maturity of each child. By 1855, she predicted, field labor would increase by 30% without a single auction purchase. She saw it as innovation. The sons saw it as something they could not name. Outside the plantation, rumors began to stir. A midwife dismissed from service hinted that the Whitmore blood runs through more veins than God intended. A former overseer, drunk in town, claimed the young master spent suspicious amounts of time near the birthing cabins. But no one dared investigate formally. The Whitmores were wealthy, connected, influential in county politics. And in 1847 Georgia, enslaved voices were not testimony. They were property. Still, tension thickened. Thomas grew withdrawn, avoiding town gatherings. Henry turned to drinking. The enslaved community watched everything, saying nothing aloud but sharing glances heavy with understanding. They knew whose features some of the children carried. By autumn of 1847, a quiet dread settled over the estate, because secrets, no matter how carefully recorded in private ledgers, have a way of seeping into the soil, and the soil of Georgia was already restless. By the winter of 1848, the Whitmore plantation was prospering beyond expectation. Cotton yields were high. Sugar production had stabilized. The estate required fewer outside purchases than any comparable property in the county. Evelyn Whitmore considered it proof of her brilliance. But beneath the appearance of order, cracks were forming. Thomas had begun keeping his own journal, hidden beneath a loose floorboard in his bedroom. In it, he did not confess guilt. He confessed confusion. He wrote of the children. He wrote of seeing his own eyes reflected back in faces that would never know him as father. He wrote of dreams where the plantation house burned while the field stood silent, watching. Henry, meanwhile, grew reckless. He gambled in Savannah. He picked fights in taverns. Once, in a drunken haze, he muttered to a fellow planter's son, "My mother breeds more than cotton." The remark earned laughter, but it also earned attention. Rumors traveled differently in the South. They moved through church pews, through market stalls, through the quiet space between polite conversation and suspicion. By early spring, Reverend Callahan, a local minister who often visited plantations to conduct Sunday sermons, began noticing something unsettling. Several children in the quarters bore unmistakable resemblance to the Whitmore boys. The shape of the jaw, the pale undertone beneath darker skin, the gray eyes. The Reverend said nothing publicly, but he watched. Inside the plantation, tension escalated when one of the enslaved women, Miriam, refused Evelyn's unspoken arrangement. She was older than the others, perhaps 27, and had already given birth twice under coercion. This time, she resisted. Evelyn did not shout. She did not strike her. She simply reassigned Miriam to the harshest labor in the fields during peak heat season. Within weeks, exhaustion broke her resistance. The message was clear. Compliance was survival. Thomas witnessed the punishment. That night, he confronted his mother again, not with outrage this time, but with desperation. "These are people," he said. Evelyn's response was chilling in its calmness. "They are assets," she corrected. "And you, Thomas, are either an asset to this family or a liability." The words landed harder than any slap. Henry overheard part of the exchange. For the first time, he began to see their mother not as a strict guardian of wealth, but as something colder, something mechanized. The plantation had become an engine, and there were gears inside it. Meanwhile, a county tax assessor conducted a routine population count across local estates. Numbers from Whitmore's books did not align cleanly with external records. Growth rates appeared unusually high compared to purchase logs. The assessor mentioned the discrepancy casually during a town gathering. Evelyn heard about it within days. She invited him to dinner. After that evening, he never raised the subject again. Money can seal many mouths. Fear seals the rest. But secrets rarely stay buried without consequence. By late 1848, a fever outbreak struck several plantations in the region. Quarters were quarantined. Physicians visited more frequently. Outside eyes saw more than before. One young doctor, newly arrived from Charleston, noticed the genetic similarities immediately. He was inexperienced, idealistic, and dangerously curious. He asked too many questions. Evelyn responded by limiting his access to records and assigning a senior overseer to shadow him during visits. Still, whispers grew. Thomas began avoiding the quarters entirely. Henry, in a rare sober moment, confessed to his brother that he sometimes wished the plantation would collapse just to end the arrangement. "Collapse means we lose everything," Thomas replied. Henry stared at him. "Maybe we already have." The enslaved community, though outwardly silent, had begun forming quiet bonds among the mothers. They recognized the pattern long before outsiders did. They understood that their children carried power, unwanted, dangerous power, because bloodlines complicate ownership, and ownership was the foundation of everything Evelyn had built. In the summer of 1849, a small fire broke out in one of the storage barns. It was contained quickly, officially labeled an accident. Unofficially, it was a warning. Someone was testing the edges of fear. Evelyn doubled security. Night patrols increased. Overseers were armed more heavily. The plantation felt less like a home and more like a fortress. Yet even fortresses fall from within. And the greatest threat to Evelyn Whitmore was no longer rumor, nor preacher, nor doctor. It was her sons, because guilt, once awakened, does not sleep easily. By 1850, the Whitmore plantation had reached its peak productivity. Nearly one-third of its enslaved labor force had been born on the estate itself. On paper, it was a financial triumph. In reality, it was a powder keg. Thomas's journal entries grew darker. He described watching children play in the yard outside the big house. Children who laughed freely, unaware of the twisted calculations that brought them into the world. He began secretly teaching one boy to read. It was a small act, dangerous, forbidden, but it was the first time Thomas chose defiance over obedience. Henry's breaking point came during a church service. Reverend Callahan spoke about moral corruption hidden beneath wealth. Though no names were mentioned, Henry felt exposed. That evening, drunk and furious, he confronted Evelyn in front of household staff. "You turn us into breeding stock," he shouted. The room froze. Evelyn dismissed the servants calmly before responding. "I turned you into survivors," she said. "When this world collapses, and it will, this land will remain in Whitmore hands because of what I built." Henry laughed bitterly. "Whitmore hands," he said. "Or Whitmore blood scattered in chains?" For the first time, Evelyn's composure cracked, but only slightly. Weeks later, the young Charleston doctor returned with formal county officials. Allegations had reached higher ears. There were questions about record inconsistencies and unauthorized practices. The visit was framed as administrative, but everyone knew it was more. Thomas made a decision that morning. He retrieved his hidden journal and handed it to the Reverend before the officials arrived. Inside were dates, names, admissions, proof. The investigation that followed did not result in dramatic arrests. Southern justice in 1850 rarely punished plantation owners severely. Instead, financial penalties were imposed. Certain arrangements were ordered to cease. Evelyn Whitmore's reputation suffered irreparable damage. Social invitations dwindled. Business partnerships strained. The system protected her from prison, but it could not protect her from exposure. Henry left Georgia within a year, relocating westward. Thomas remained but withdrew from management. The plantation slowly declined under hired overseers. The enslaved children born under Evelyn's design grew into adulthood, carrying complex identities, both victims and living evidence of a dark strategy. Evelyn herself aged rapidly after the scandal. She spent her final years confined largely to her study, surrounded by ledgers no one respected anymore. She had engineered a bloodline, but she had not engineered loyalty. And in the end, the empire she built through control unraveled through conscience. Because even in a system built on ownership, blood has a way of demanding truth.